Welcome to LHC Unplugged, where you'll hear unscripted conversations about life, faith, the Bible, and today's world with the pastors from LongHillChapel here in Chatham, New Jersey. Ready to grow in your spiritual journey? Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, welcome to LHC Unplugged. I'm Sarah Harrington. I'm the Director of Communications here at LongHillChapel, and I have our lead pastor, Michael Hoddy, and our Associate Pastor, Joey Monteleone. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
So good to have you guys again this week. Well, guys, we are steps away from February.
Ugh.
Somebody's birthday is in February.
Oh, yeah.
Not mine.
Yeah.
That's Pastor
Coming
Joey.
up on the 15th.
How are you feeling about it?
Well, what are birthdays? Because as you get older, it's
there's a day on which you're born, and it is a calendar day, and it has a number.
But what are they for? Right? Like when you're a kid, it's like it makes total sense. You get a cake, you get a sword, and it's great. But now as you get older, there's no swords.
What?
There's no swords.
Do we need to talk about
I did
this?
get a sword one year, and it was awesome.
Like an actual sword?
An actual sword. Yeah.
Why?
Because it was like, hey, you're the only boy in this family filled with girls.
So here's a sword?
Yeah.
That would not be something I would give any of my
that
boys.
just seems like a bad idea.
But there's no more swords as an adult. So why have the celebration?
But there can be. You could have a birthday. You could have some me time and buy yourself a sword on the internet, which is
that's not a bad idea.
It's not less weird than getting a sword as a child.
I think it was foam, for the record.
Oh, well, that's helpful.
Yeah, it wasn't.
I asked if it was a real sword, and I didn't mean like the conception of it. I meant was it made
in my imagination? It was real.
Oh, of course, you're a boy.
I think we have birthdays now as like you can celebrate them as adults because you could look at where you've been on your birthdays, where you are.
True.
Think of, you didn't have 5 little nuggies when you had that sword.
That is very true. And now if they had swords, I'd be running for my life.
My thing with birthdays as an adult, and first of all, I have 2 boys and they have birthdays in the same month. And so it's really just turned into this big
Birthday
Celebration,
Lollapalooza.
yeah. Great.
birthday. Yeah, it's birthday palooza for all the boys. And my wife Grace, hers is in January, so she's kind of all by herself there. And it is something. When my older son was born, I was not certain about how I would feel about sharing it, but I love it. We have a blast, and really for me, it's an excuse to get people together, and friends and people who are close to us, and I'm always looking for that excuse, but I enjoy that. I do not enjoy getting older.
No, but getting older comes with its perks too, right?
Does it?
Yes.
Yes and no.
Let's say yes.
Yeah, because this year,
positivity.
you have a big number coming up this year. So.
Well, I can't wait to celebrate
25.
that.
Oh, I can.
It's going to be great.
So now that we are getting into February, we have closed our Reset sermon series. If there was one, and there was a bunch of great takeaways from this series, one that really stood out to you, and I'll tell you mine. So it was something you said, Pastor Michael. It was reset doesn't always mean doing your life differently. Sometimes it means seeing your life differently. That hit hard. And it was such a good reminder, almost like slow down, take a breath, and change your mindset.
Yeah, we're always looking at improvement or a better season or more purpose or fill in the blank as something that's out there. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think one of them is that when we're kind of in quest mode with that, it's exciting. It kind of pushes some of our discovery buttons in a way that we like, and it's way more exciting than having to kind of look in the mirror. And not only see where the places that God is, even if you're not a Christian, but where the places that I have to focus on. But I think the other thing we miss is most of us, we look at the downside of who we are, and we're comparing our worst moments to someone else's best moments. And what it does is it causes us to miss out on things we talked about, the gifts, the positioning, all of those P's that we talked about, and we're going to talk about again, that God has given us, the people He's placed us around, the just all of the pieces that make us us. Because I think it's easy for me to look at like you guys and say, wow, I really admire that about them. But just to not even be able to say the same thing about myself, because I'm used to me and you're used to you and we're used to ourselves. And so we don't, there's nothing that really seems very special about that.
And it's almost like you have to take a good look in the mirror because we admire you the same way you admire us. But like you said, it's almost like we can't get out of our own way to see it.
Well, and it's easier not only to pursue something that's outside of yourself, it's easier to see something that's outside of yourself. We all have blind spots, but I think even more in a mundane fashion, we just don't actually see who we are because so often we're defined by so many other things. We're defined by the world around us. We're defined by the expectations of people around us. We're defined by our schedules. We're defined by our workplaces. We're defined by our station in life. And so we lose actually who God has made us. And we still have to show up to many of those other things, but we lose who God has made us in the midst of all of those other things.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back a little bit to purpose. So it's like, why is that we look for purpose as something to be achieved instead of something to be received?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. And one of the things that I think around purpose is that deep down we're probably more comfortable with purpose and a purpose that we can measure and a purpose that we can point to and something that we've built within our own effort rather than a purpose that's handed to us by God. Because like I love the way you kind of posed it, the achieved versus received. When it's achieved, that allows us to say, look what I've done. But the received purpose asks us to say, look what I've been given. And when we've been given something, there's a follow-up question, which is, what are you going to do with it? There's a huge difference between accomplishment and responsibility. And one of the ways that I think purpose is presented within Scripture is that there's a stewardship factor to it. When we're able to make that switch, very similar to what we were saying, looking at this very differently, instead of looking at it as something that we achieve, something that we now receive. Well, like you said, Pastor Michael, the thing that gets now eliminated is comparison. Because now it doesn't matter what other people are doing if I've been given something unique. If you've been given something unique, I don't need to compare myself with anyone or anything else now because my purpose is already established. It was handed to me. Therefore, I don't have to compare it to anybody else. And I think when you know what you're called to and why you're called to it, you don't need to borrow somebody else's gifts. You don't need to borrow somebody else's passions and somebody else's life, essentially, because you've been given one. And I think that's something that we need to come back to. I need to come back to every single day when I look around at a culture and a social media platform and a world that demands I compare myself to everything but what I've been called to. It's a really hard challenge.
I think there's some limitations to what I'm about to say, but the world around us, kind of the standard of comparison is always someone or something else. Mm-hmm. And if we're not careful, we lapse into that with ourselves, and we actually lapse into it with other people around us. Why can't you be more like fill in the blank? I think a better standard is to compare yourself with yourself. Mm-hmm. And especially around a benchmark of the turning of a year or something like that, to not just say, am I a better person or a worse person? Did I do more good things or bad things? That can turn. That's why I say that can turn into a performanceism, which is actually ultimately condemning. But if you can say, God has made me for a purpose, I'm discovering what that is. I'm reflecting on it, but I'm letting other people, the right people, reflect into me what they see that God is doing, which is, again, one of the reasons a community of faith is like our church here at LongHillChapel is so important, is because it's one of the healthy places that can potentially happen. But to just see what has that journey looked like on my journey of purpose, of showing up in the moments that God has made for me, even if they aren't the ones I would have picked, of stewarding the opportunities, but also the challenges. How did I respond to that? Did it look more like Jesus or less like Jesus? And so when we start to kind of reflect on ourselves with ourselves before God, that's one of the key parts of it. Then I think that's a better standard of comparison. And it's not, what did I accomplish in the name of God? It's, do I look more like Jesus as I go through all the things, as I go through challenges, as I go through trials, as I go through uncertainty, as I go through joy and hope? Am I able to be the same consistent God God-given, God-made person that reflects Jesus as I go through those things.
And Paul talks about that in Galatians 6. He says, each one should test their own actions, then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. So it is a spiritual discipline of doing the hard work of not comparing yourself to someone.
Yeah, and I think the phrase "take pride," I'm kind of doing real-time Bible interpretation here.
Here we go.
But it's not like, look at what I have done. It's not that kind of thing. It's to place importance, to place priority.
Value.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we tend to neglect our gifts. And we always say, like you guys talked about, how potential, it's not for a lack of potential. The potential is there. But like, how do we tap into that?
You had talked about one of the things that jumped out to you most profoundly. One of the things that jumped out most profoundly to me within this series was something you said, Pastor Michael, which is we don't need more potential. We're always going to have potential.
There's always potential. It's
always there. I think the deeper question that we're really asking within that is, how does potential become faithfulness? There's a story in the book of Exodus right before Moses is sent back to Egypt to free the Israelites from Egyptian oppression. God is having this dialogue with Moses at this burning bush. You might be familiar with that encounter. And he's calling him to this big thing, this thing filled with potential. But Moses is kind of back and forth with God going, yeah, well, what about this? And what about that? And I don't know if he was stalling or just insecure or what was going on there. But God asks a very interesting question. He says, what is in your hand? And it's a great question because, like we talked about with the stewardship thing, yes, it's, what have I already given you? What kind of, what are the 4 P's?
Oh, you're asking me in the moment.
Here we go.
I could make some up. They might not be the same ones.
It's a sword. It's people, it's proficiencies, it's position. I won't get the last one. Do you know what it is?
I do, but I have the memory of like a small toad.
Whatever they are, there is a stewardship thing, right? Like we want to develop, we want to grow, and all of that's good. And all of that
passion. It's passion.
Passion.
Yes.
There we go. Thank you.
Sarah was listening.
That is good. All of that is within that question when God says, what is in your hand? But then God does something really interesting. And this really jumped out at me this week. Moses answers that question. He says, a staff. And then God says, throw it on the ground. And God turns the staff into a snake. Later on, he says, take your hand and stick it inside your coat. And when he pulls his hand out, it's filled with leprosy. What jumps out at me with that is like, yes, there is the call to stewardship with what God has given us. But what happens within that encounter? God is doing miracles. Not Moses. God is. And I think that that's really the call underneath this potential question. What we're asking is, yeah, there's always going to be potential. We can always show up to the passions, proficiency, people, and I forgot it again. What is it? Position. We can always show up to those
Maybe
things.
we ought to stop doing this.
I'm going to keep doing it until I get it. We can always show up to those things faithfully, right? There's all of that. But I think there's the recognition, and I think what God was asking of me in that is, yeah, you can show up to all of those things. I can give you all of those opportunities, but you remember, I'm the one who does this, right? I'm the one who does this on your behalf, and I do it for my name. That changed my mind completely about potential. It's not what I get to show up to and how he's gifted me and all these other things. Yes, there is a responsibility factor with that, and I think that's the delighting heart of God with his children. It's a gift that he gives us. At the same time, the recognition and the invitation for me is like, God's doing something right now, and I get to show up to it.
Well, it's passion, position, proficiency,
and people.
Can we say that together?
Passions, position, proficiency, and people.
Yeah, we are a very trustworthy resource in everyone's life. What I think is interesting about that story that you told is that God gives Moses some pretty wacky raw material.
Yeah.
it's like if you were going to go try to free the people, you'd want an army or some chariots or, some lightning bolts or something like that. And he gives him a stick that turns into a snake, and he has this ability to make his hand appear diseased or not when he pulls it out of it. And I think any person would look at that and say, this isn't terribly helpful, God.
Right. Weird magic tricks, but okay.
If there's a party, it's a good, cool thing to do, but like in terms of freeing the people, it doesn't seem like that. And it's like you said, there's a miracle involved, and there's us trusting that what God has given us is enough for the assignment or the place he's put us to demonstrate purpose. That takes incredible faith.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think when we begin to look at our lives, we have to do it with that lens of faith. We have to do it with like, okay, I think you might be calling me to this thing, God, but as I look at myself, I don't see the raw material that I would pick, but I am trusting that you see something and you've created something in me that involves you doing a literal miracle in my life, and to really allow this to be fit for the purpose that you have.
So God knows our purpose.
Yes, he does. And I'm going to say a phrase that I don't think I've said.
Passions, proficiency, positions, and people.
Good job, Pastor Joey.
Thanks. I got it.
You got it. You get a gold star. But I think God is about the opportunity, and he's about the equipping. Like he's the one who puts who we are in us. And it's where, those 4 P's, he works those out in our lives. And yes, we have to take steps of faith to walk into them. We can't be passive about this. We can't get ahead of God. We can't do our version of it, but we can't be passive about it. But one of the things I've become aware of is very often we frame our lives kind of in terms of where we're going next. So what's the next station? What's the next achievement? What's the next run? What's the next obstacle? Whatever you want to fill the blank in with. And I think God is a lot more concerned with who we're becoming rather than where we're going. So he's more concerned about who is, and this comes back to that reflection thing we were talking about earlier. Like in light of all of these things, in light of what he's placed in us, and in light of the opportunities and the path he's placed around us, who are we becoming with that? Because sometimes we end up with things in our lives, either by circumstance or God has placed them there, which, I believe he does that regardless. And we grapple with them, and it takes us in a direction. It can take us into apathy or bitterness or questioning. And it's never bad to work that stuff out before God, but when it becomes our dominant narrative, all these things are kind of decision points. They're like a Y in the road, and you have to make a decision. Am I going to go towards faith, or am I going to hang out over here? And that's where who are we becoming on the road to God's purpose is so important, because he will, if we're faithful, if we take steps of faith, if we step out when we need to step out, if we wait when we need to wait, if we continually bring it before him, he'll work out the path. But who we are developing into, and this comes back to that word I think you mentioned in the last podcast, which is sanctification, is really the most important thing. And when we do that, our trust grows, our faith grows, and actually our vision clarifies, because now we're seeing all of these things the way that God would see them and how he sees them in us.
And I think the other thing too is, as you talk about that sounds like a lot. And I think, one, it is a lot, but we were created for purpose, not the pressure of getting it right. You kind of hear all this and it's like, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to be able to pull this off? Yeah, I know God is the one who calls me and God's the one who equips, but I still have to show up. If there's that level of pressure, that's not what God's calling you to.
No, and that's the thing, back to the miraculous nature of God, is that God takes our shortcomings, he takes our missteps, he takes the places where we got it wrong. And I think just around this table, we can look at our own lives and see all of the places that we
100%.
We misunderstood, or we responded the wrong way, or we didn't steward the opportunity well. The great thing about God is he's not like a one and done God.
He's a God of second chances.
And third and 10th. And he takes the things, this is what it really means in that passage in the New Testament, where the Apostle Paul says, God works all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his what? His purpose. And that doesn't mean that all things are good. And I think that verse gets misinterpreted, that somehow bad things, there's a magical goodness in bad things. That's not true. There's some bad things in life. There's suffering, there's tragedy, there's evil even, but God can redeem good out of it. And he can redeem good out of our missteps, our mistakes, even our willful running away from him. And that's the kind of miraculous, redemptive, resurrecting, wonder-working God. And it's, if anyone is listening to this, that's the thing I would want them to get, is that it doesn't matter how far off this you think you are, how much you think you've missed it, or you hear this big weighty thing. God is in the business not only of giving you purpose, but restoring you to your purpose and restoring the things in your life that seem like they took you in the opposite direction of it, and somehow working that path out in only the way that he can. That's who God is. And all we have to do is try to take the next step with the light that he's given us in faith and get back up and go again, because he reaches down to us. God is he's such a sucker for people who turn in his direction, who get off the ground and receive his hand, and he pulls us back into our purpose. And sometimes it takes a long time, but that's been the story of my life. If you detect that I have some passion about this, it's one of the P's. It's because that's been the story of my life, and that's who God is. So this isn't like a Rubik's Cube that we need to solve, that we have a limited amount of time, and it just seems very complicated to do. And if we get it wrong, we're out. It's a much better God-sized story than that.
It's also hard, because when you're in it and you go through the challenges or the turmoil, it's hard to see the light.
Yeah.
Right? And it's hard to understand why what's going on or occurring is, because you're not 10 steps ahead like God always is. But it's still hard in the moment.
Yeah. And you can trust God even in the dark. You can. And it may not, like, we're always like, okay, give me enough to see how this works out. I would love that. I'd love to see around certain corners and over certain hills. And I think anybody in life would love to do that. But this isn't about what's up there. This is about who's with you. And in that same dark place, I think sometimes Satan, the enemy of our souls, speaks condemnation to us. He speaks the things to say, well, you missed it. You screwed it up. You'll never see it. You should give up. You should just turn inward, or just do this for yourself, because there's no greater reason to do it. And that's where holding on to faith and holding on to hope and really holding on to the nature of God. One of the things we do in worship here at LongHillChapel is rehearse the nature and the character of God, because there's so many times it's easy to forget it, and even to receive some lies about who God is, and maybe that he doesn't have our good in mind, but he always does.
And you can hear the passion in Pastor Michael. You have passion for the people.
You got a spare sermon out of this.
That's 2 P's.
Oh, that's very good. Good job. We should have awards.
Well, you're proficient in your speaking, so there's 3.
Yeah, you're driving this into the ground now.
Here we go.
But going back to passion, so you said something, Pastor Michael. Passion rebels against discipline, but it needs it. And if you look at those 2 words, you look at passion and you look at discipline. Discipline is, especially as parents, it's not fun.
It's a passion killer. If you're painting the walls passionately and discipline comes in, yeah, that's gonna come right up against that.
But think about painting. Painting can be good.
Sure.
It can be great. You
In the
can
right
paint
context.
your house. You can paint a painting on a canvas. And, I have all sorts of drawings that, and other art that my kids have made, and we all do. And there's something beautiful about, like, when my son draws something for me, it doesn't matter how inaccurate the drawing is. It's that he did it, and he did it for me. And so that's a good thing. If he does that on the walls, not so great.
Right.
But passion, we live in a world where everyone's just like, just follow your dreams. Well, dreams are great, but they don't, if there's not a framework around them, they don't really accomplish very much. And we just kind of bounce from feeling to feeling and dopamine hit to dopamine hit and thing to thing. And so any passion that's really going to have impact over time, it needs discipline. And really what discipline is a refining and a channeling of it. And it needs commitment. It needs, you need to take your passion and actually put it on the line, like put it on the hook so that there's a responsibility that's created around it. That's when it starts to have an impact. That's when it actually starts to make a difference in the world. But it rebels against that because I think we like the vibes and the feelings of passion, and they're big and they're great. But unless there's a commitment and a commitment to refining it, I mean, think about, we are all married, and there were feelings that got us into that. But feelings don't carry you through year 10. They don't carry you through kids. They don't carry you through difficult times. They don't carry you through sickness. They don't carry you through some of the obstacles of life. You need more than that. I actually, and one of the things I tell when we counsel couples who are going to get married is I affirm, like, look, you have these feelings of love for each other, but those are actually there to keep you together long enough so that some better bonds begin to form that aren't feeling based. Because if our passions are just feelings, we'll have days where we feel it and days where we don't. And so it needs to become more than that. And the things that do that are discipline and some accountability. Like, I've talked about my older son's in sports, and he loves baseball and he loves being a pitcher in baseball, but he's had to learn to continue to do that. He's had to learn that, when he's on the mound and he's got 3 runners on and it's not going well, that he still has to show up to it. He can't leave. He can't give up. And he commits to doing better. He commits to being part of a team. That's that putting it on the hook for something. And so that's why passion needs discipline. But we like to disconnect the feelings of passion from the reality that is totally not vibes for how it gets into the world.
Well, the other thing with that too, the thing that comes to mind is that passion kind of focuses on an outcome, but the discipline focuses on the process.
That's great.
Right? So like passion is like, okay, this is who I want to become. This is what I want to look like. This is what I want my life to be. This is where I want to be in life. And that's wonderful. Passion can get you there. The discipline is the daily showing up to then make that happen. So you actually need both. You can't just dismiss one and say, well, I can't be passionate about this, but I am going to be disciplined. Okay. You
do need both. Yeah.
That in and of itself is just rote doing things, for not really, we've all been in an environment where we've had to do something we're not passionate about. And you know how you feel about that. But you also know how the feeling is when you're passionate about something, but there's no process of getting there. So like you just said, it'll burn out really quickly. So when you marry the two, now you can actually develop the skills, the talents, the stewardship, like we were talking about, of getting to that outcome, whether that's spiritual, physical, emotional, mental, all of those things. But you need both. You can't just decouple them.
Yeah. And it's going to start with the one and lead to the other, hopefully over time. That's like it. I think God gives us those feelings, the things that break our heart. There was one author who called it, maybe not in the positive sense, but he called it our holy discontent. Like, what is it in the world that just gets us up and going? But then you have to channel, you have to connect it. You have to actually make some consequences for yourself when it comes to that. I think one of the great challenges of our time is that it's easy to go like or share something on social media and feel like we've done a thing. And we kind of get the feelings hit from doing that, but we actually haven't done anything. And so it's actually putting a price tag on our passion or putting a price tag on our feelings and saying, if I'm going to allow myself to feel this, if I'm going to allow myself to go here, I'm actually going to put myself on the hook for some of the next steps. Maybe not the whole process, but at least taking a next step and saying, okay, I think there's something here. Now, what's my next step in working that and walking that out?
So it's interesting. Passion kind of sounds like a vision board in a sense to me, right? So we have this idea, and I think, I can't speak for you guys, but my idea, I wasn't going to be here at this age, which I'm not going to say out loud. This was not what I thought, because when I was younger, I was going to be a professional soccer player and I was going to be on ESPN. And it's just interesting when you're talking about you have the passion, but I also feel like the passion is what gets you to where you are. It's what got me here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And to be clear, Sarah you're really good soccer player. Like, I played soccer. I played it in high school, but not like you played soccer, like very different things.
I know this is surprising. I did not play soccer.
Oh, that's shocking.
Yeah.
That's actually a hard thing, right? When you can see enough Like we all have dreams about like whatever it is we think we ought to be doing, especially when we're younger, we do. But I think the hardest thing is that good thing versus kind of God thing, like separation, that when we can see enough of something that you can kind of see over the kind of the hill of, like you did with your soccer career, it's almost harder when that direction changes.
I think it's harder when we don't hold things loosely.
Yeah.
You know, like I have time after time, instance after instance, where not only did I have a passion, but I had quite the grip on it. And what I was not willing to submit, what I was not willing to let go of, those things actually died the wrong way. They died because I, in and of my ability to control outcomes, could not manifest it. And therefore it then had to die. And it was embarrassing and it was frustrating and it was a death, so to speak. Whereas I feel like if we can hold things very loosely in our lives, whether it's the call of our lives, where we think we're supposed to be, how our kids are going to turn out, where our careers are going to take us, if we can hold those things loosely and submit them to a God, I think there is a death that is in that, but that actually gives way to life.
I think a really good way to do that is, if you're a follower of Jesus, is a daily laying down of your life, of your passions, of saying, God, I believe you have given this to me. And that's the first thing, is there's that, I think, almost deception that if we're going to follow Jesus, like all the things that we like, we have to just stop doing those and, go be a monk in a monastery somewhere. And maybe there's some people who are called to that. I don't want to diminish that, but all the good things in our lives need to be laid down over and over again. And it's not because God's trying to snatch them from us and trade us for something awful. It's so they're submitted to him. It's so they're held loosely. So they're saying, God, you've given me this thing, and how you choose to use it, I receive that today, even if it goes in a different direction than I ever thought that it would.
Well, and things that you don't think you need to submit to God and hand to God. This happened last week. There was something that I really wanted to see happen. And I was just sort of, complaining to God, if I'm being honest. And I remember saying, I really want this. I really want it. And I want it now. And I felt like the Spirit of God was saying, will you give that to me? And I said, fine, you can have it. And I felt there was this shift in my perspective. But it was more of a realization, like, I didn't think I had to even give that to you. So there's things that we think, okay, I'll give God my career, my visions, my aspirations, my 30,000 foot view of my life. But then there's the little things too. Yeah. Then there's the daily things that you don't think you have to give to God, when, the call of God is not fragmented pieces of our lives. It is our life. It's the desires and the callings, the goals, the things that you want to give to God and the things you think you can hold back. Yeah. No, he's calling for all of it.
Yeah, there's this passage in 1 Peter chapter 5 where the writer, he says, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, and it'll lift you up in due time. I think we think of that like, okay, pride. I've got to get rid of my pride and be humble. But humble really just means human. That's the root word of it, obviously. But it's to recognize our limitedness, to recognize the limitedness of our lives, of our perspective, of our understanding of things, and to recognize that God is mighty. And if we're humbling ourselves under the mighty hand of God, he's not smacking us with that hand. He's protecting us with that hand. He's covering us with that hand. And then he's carrying us with that hand. And there's that promise that when we do that, he will lift us up in due time. It may not be our time. It may not be in the way, but we have confidence that God will lift us up. He'll lift those passions up. He'll lift those things that we laid down back up. And because he's a redeeming, restoring, resurrecting God.
You guys are the best. What a podcast. Seriously, mic drop on that. That's amazing.
Mics are expensive, so you shouldn't drop them.
Don't drop them. Don't drop them.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to LHC Unplugged. As a reminder, we meet on Sunday mornings at 10:15 at LongHillChapel in Chatham, New Jersey. We also live stream our service at 10:15, so you can catch us in person or online every Sunday. And if you have any questions you want us to answer on the podcast, you can send them to us at questions@lhcnj.net. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to having you next time.